Dozens of people living in tents and RVs are being offered new places to live. This following a major cleanup operation at an encampment in Gardena.
A luxury RV lot overrun by squatters, trash piling up, trailers burning, and safety concerns growing.
Living in an RV used to be a last resort. In 2026, it's becoming a crime. Families with jobs, kids, and nowhere else to go are being fined, towed, and erased. Not because they broke the law, but because housing failed them. This isn't homelessness anymore. It's criminalization. Across America, cities are redefining what counts as shelter. RVs, vans, and trailers are now classified strictly as vehicles, not housing, even when families live in them full-time. This legal shift eliminates all housing protections. There's no right to remain, no eviction notice requirement, and no obligation for cities to offer alternatives. Between 2020 and 2025, median rents jumped 30 to 40% nationwide, while wages rose only 15 to 18%. As affordability collapsed, hundreds of thousands of families turned to RVs as their last option. Instead of addressing costs, cities responded by reclassifying RV habitation as code violations, not housing needs. By 2026, many municipal codes explicitly prohibit sleeping, cooking, or storing belongings inside vehicles. Families can be cited simply for existing. Once cited, enforcement escalates rapidly. Warnings become fines. Fines become towing orders, and towing eliminates shelter completely. The critical issue is legal framing. Governments claim they're only moving vehicles, not displacing people. In reality, families lose their only roof. This terminology removes accountability while accelerating homelessness. What makes this particularly devastating is the speed of consequences. A family can receive a citation on Monday, accumulate fines by Wednesday, and face impound notices by Friday. The system treats shelter as a parking violation, stripping away stability through bureaucratic language rather than acknowledging the human cost of enforcement without alternatives. What used to be a parking issue has transformed into criminal enforcement. Cities nationwide are passing ordinances prohibiting overnight parking, sleeping, or remaining in vehicles beyond set time limits, even on public streets. Enforcement typically begins between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., the exact hours when families have nowhere else to go. By 2026, enforcement data reveals sharp increases in vehicle habitation citations. Fines range from $75 to $250 per violation, with some cities issuing citations daily. Within 1 month, a family can accumulate $1,500 to $3,000 in fines, exceeding most emergency savings. Failure to pay doesn't pause enforcement. Unpaid citations trigger registration holds, court summons, or impound orders. Once an RV is impounded, retrieval costs often exceed $2,000 to $5,000, not including daily storage fees. Most families never recover their vehicle. This transforms survival into a legal trap. Families rotate streets constantly, sleep in short intervals, and avoid lights or generators to prevent detection. Criminalization doesn't reduce homelessness. It forces constant motion where stability becomes impossible and enforcement replaces solutions. The psychological toll is measurable. Studies tracking displaced families show stress-related health conditions increase 40 to 60% within 3 months of continuous displacement. Children miss 30 to 50% more school days. Medical appointments are skipped. Employment becomes unstable when sleep deprivation affects performance, creating a downward spiral where enforcement directly causes the instability it claims to address. One of 2026's most overlooked realities is that many RV-dwelling households are employed. Surveys from multiple metro areas show 40 to 60% of vehicle-dwelling adults hold jobs in healthcare support, logistics, construction, retail, and food services. Despite employment, these families are labeled illegal occupants because their shelter doesn't meet zoning or habitation codes. Income no longer protects against displacement. A parent can finish their shift, pick up their child, and still receive citations for sleeping in their RV that night. The math is unforgiving. In many cities, two-bedroom apartments now exceed $2,200 monthly, while median take-home pay for service sector households remains under $4,000. After food, fuel, insurance, and childcare, nothing remains for rent. Criminalization creates devastating feedback loops. Citations interfere with work schedules. Court dates cause missed shifts. Towing eliminates transportation to employment. Once jobs are lost, families are reclassified from working poor to chronically homeless, even though enforcement caused the collapse. Consider a typical case. A nursing assistant earning $17 hourly works 35 hours weekly, generating roughly $2,400 monthly after taxes. Rent consumes $2,200, leaving $200 for utilities, food, transportation, and healthcare. One unexpected expense, car repair, medical bill, or childcare gap, forces impossible choices. The RV becomes shelter, then citations begin, then employment unravels. The system treats this mathematical impossibility as moral failure, punishing families for economic gaps they didn't create. As housing costs exploded, social services didn't scale to match demand. Instead, enforcement budgets grew. Many cities now spend more per person on citations, towing, and police overtime than on emergency housing placement. Ticketing is politically cheaper than housing. Citations cost cities little to issue but generate revenue or justification for removal. In contrast, temporary housing averages $80 to $150 per night per family, with no quick resolution. By 2026, waiting lists for assistance often exceed 12 to 24 months. Families seeking help are told no available units, yet enforcement continues without pause. This creates impossible contradictions. Shelter is unavailable, but remaining unhoused is illegal. Data from enforcement-heavy regions shows citation volume doubling while housing placements remain flat. This proves the goal isn't resolution, it's removal. Ticketing shifts burdens onto families who already cannot pay, ensuring ongoing legal system contact instead of stability. The financial comparison is stark. In one major city, annual enforcement costs per displaced family averaged $4,800 in citations, towing, court processing, and police hours. Meanwhile, the same city's emergency housing voucher program served only 12% of applicants due to funding limits. Society pays enforcement costs repeatedly while refusing one-time housing investments. The result is predictable: debt accumulation, court involvement, and permanent displacement, all without adding a single affordable home. Enforcement becomes self-perpetuating revenue generation disguised as public policy, where the appearance of action replaces actual solutions. When an RV is towed, homelessness becomes immediate and absolute. Unlike tents or encampments, an RV contains everything: shelter, transportation, medication, identification, work tools, school supplies, and personal records. Towing happens fast. In many cities, once an RV receives multiple citations, authorities can tow with 24 hours notice or less. Retrieval requires proof of registration, insurance, and payment of all fines, often totaling $3,000 to $7,000. Most families cannot recover their vehicle. Once sold or scrapped, there's no appeal that restores shelter. Parents lose ability to reach work. Children lose stability overnight. Medical equipment and prescriptions are frequently lost permanently. This is why towing isn't enforcement, it's eradication. It doesn't relocate families, it dismantles lives in one action. After towing, families transition from RV living to street homelessness, where risks multiply and recovery becomes exponentially harder. Towing ends any remaining path back to stability, and it's increasingly used as first resort, not last. Storage lots become graveyards for working families' lives. One impound facility in California holds over 200 RVs belonging to families who couldn't afford retrieval. Inside are photo albums, children's artwork, work uniforms, tools representing years of accumulated stability. The lot charges $75 daily storage. After 30 days, ownership transfers to the facility. Families lose not just current shelter, but years of possessions, with no compensation or acknowledgement of the cascading harm caused. By 2026, tens of thousands of children live full-time in RVs with their families, not by choice, but because housing costs outpaced wages. When RV habitation becomes criminalized, children absorb consequences first. School stability depends on fixed addresses, consistent sleep, and reliable transportation. Enforcement destroys all three. Many school districts require proof of residency to enroll or remain enrolled. When RVs are forced to move repeatedly, families struggle maintaining enrollment, leading to frequent transfers, learning gaps, and higher dropout risk. Federal protections exist on paper, but enforcement varies widely. Children living under constant citation threats experience chronic stress. Studies show housing instability increases anxiety, depression, and behavioral challenges in children by 30 to 50% compared to housed peers. When nighttime sweeps occur, kids are often awakened by police lights and knocking, events mirroring trauma responses seen in disaster displacement. Once families are cited or towed, child welfare agencies may become involved, not because of abuse, but because families lack stable housing. This creates dangerous paradoxes. The state criminalizes shelter, then penalizes parents for instability it caused. Educational impacts are measurable and severe. Children experiencing housing displacement show 25 to 40% declines in standardized test scores within one school year. Attendance drops significantly. Social relationships fragment with each move. Long-term studies show displaced children are 60% more likely to drop out before graduation, limiting lifetime earning potential and perpetuating poverty cycles that enforcement claims to address. Safe parking programs were once presented as humane compromises, designated areas where families could legally sleep in RVs overnight. By 2026, many programs are shrinking or disappearing entirely. Funding cuts, neighborhood opposition, and political pressure have reduced capacity instead of expanding it. Most safe parking programs serve fewer than 50 vehicles, while cities often have thousands of RV-dwelling households. Even at peak operation, less than 10% of need is met. As enforcement increases, demand spikes, but availability collapses. Waiting lists now stretch for months, with eligibility rules tightening. Some programs exclude families with older RVs, minor code violations, or multiple occupants. Others limit stays to 30 to 90 days, after which families return to criminalized streets. The quiet removal of these programs allows cities to claim alternatives exist while making them inaccessible in practice. When programs close, enforcement doesn't pause, it accelerates. Families are cited for not using services no longer available. This creates compliance traps. Families are told to use available resources, yet those resources are structurally insufficient. Safe parking was never a solution, but its removal exposes cities choosing enforcement over expansion. In one California county, safe parking capacity dropped from 85 spaces to 22 between 2024 and 2026, while the estimated RV dwelling population grew from 800 to over 2,000 families. Meanwhile, enforcement citations increased 340%. The message is clear: visibility reduction through displacement, not stability through support. In 2026, enforcement rarely begins by acknowledging homelessness. Instead, it starts with technical violations, expired registration, insurance lapses, cracked windshields, broken lights, or emissions failures. These issues are common among financially strained households, and they carry legal consequences. Once cited, families enter cascades. Registration holds prevent renewal. Insurance premiums rise or become unaffordable. Without compliance, RVs become unroadworthy, triggering impound eligibility. Shelter is lost through bureaucratic escalation, not direct eviction. This method shields cities from legal challenges. Officials claim neutral enforcement of traffic laws, even when those laws disproportionately impact RV dwellers. Data shows vehicle habitation citations cluster in low-income zones, not tourist or commercial districts. For families, fixing mechanical issues costs $500 to $2,000, money they don't have. Failure to fix accelerates enforcement. Compliance becomes mathematically impossible. By weaponizing vehicle codes, cities achieve displacement without acknowledging housing responsibility. The system punishes poverty indirectly, converting financial hardship into legal non-compliance, then using that non-compliance to justify removal. Consider registration requirements. Most states require annual renewal costing $50 to $200, plus proof of insurance averaging $100 to $300 monthly for older RVs. A family surviving on $3,000 monthly cannot simultaneously afford rent, insurance, registration, food, and fuel. When forced to choose, registration lapses. That lapse becomes the legal justification for impound, completing displacement through paperwork rather than honest acknowledgement of housing system failure. Homeowners associations have become key drivers of RV displacement. By 2026, many cities actively coordinate with HOAs, responding to complaints with rapid enforcement sweeps near residential zones. HOAs often frame RVs as nuisances or safety concerns, regardless of actual behavior. Once complaints are logged, cities prioritize those locations for ticketing and towing. This creates enforcement hotspots based on visibility, not harm. Private neighborhoods influence public policy. Even when RVs are parked legally on public streets, HOA pressure can trigger parking rule changes or targeted patrols. Families are pushed from area to area, narrowing legal options with each move. This coordination blurs lines between public governance and private preference. Families lose access to streets funded by their own taxes, while enforcement serves property value preservation over human need. The result is geographic exclusion. Entire neighborhoods become off-limits to unhoused families, accelerating segregation by income and housing status. The mechanics are revealing. One suburban city's internal emails show direct HOA city coordination. HOAs submit complaint maps marking RV locations, city enforcement responds within 48 hours, and follow-up sweeps occur weekly until areas are cleared. public streets become privately controlled through complaint-driven enforcement. Families report being approached by HOA representatives demanding immediate departure from public parking, despite lacking any legal authority. When families refuse, citations appear within hours, proving coordination that prioritizes aesthetics over constitutional rights to access public spaces. As enforcement intensifies, families are forced farther from job centers. Urban RV bans push households into rural zones where land is cheaper but services are scarce. Commutes stretch to 60 to 100 miles, fuel costs rise, and job retention becomes impossible. Rural areas lack public transportation, school support, and medical infrastructure. Once pushed out, families lose access to systems that kept them functioning. Isolation replaces opportunity. This outward pressure creates invisible displacement. Cities appear cleaned up, while homelessness spreads into deserts, industrial corridors, and agricultural regions, areas never designed to absorb it. By 2026, homelessness is no longer concentrated, it's dispersed. That dispersion makes crises harder to track, easier to ignore, and far deadlier for families caught between. The human cost is measurable. Families report fuel costs jumping from $200 to $800 monthly when forced to distant locations. Jobs requiring reliable arrival times become impossible to maintain. Children lose school access entirely in some rural areas lacking enrollment capacity. Medical emergencies become life-threatening when nearest hospitals are 40 to 60 miles away. One family tracked their displacement progression. Started in urban center, pushed to industrial suburbs 15 miles out, then to agricultural areas 45 miles distant. Finally to desert land 80 miles from original employment. Each move increased expenses while reducing income opportunities. Within 6 months, both parents lost jobs, children were unenrolled from school, and the family faced complete systemic disconnection, exactly the outcome enforcement claimed to prevent. For years, RV parks were presented as solutions for displaced families. By 2026, that option has effectively collapsed. Monthly RV park rates now average $900 to $1,500, not including electricity, water surcharges, background checks, or deposits. In many metro areas, rates exceed $2,000, rivaling apartment rents without tenant protections. Availability is the bigger issue. Many parks operate at 95 to 100% occupancy, prioritizing short-term tourists paying higher nightly rates. Families seeking monthly stays are often denied outright, especially those with children, older RVs, or limited income verification. Age restrictions are increasingly enforced. RVs older than 10 to 15 years are rejected regardless of condition. This excludes the majority of families forced into RV living who purchased older units due to cost. Parks can refuse without explanation, leaving families no appeal. Even when accepted, parks impose strict rules conflicting with family life, guest limits, curfews, and zero-tolerance eviction clauses. One complaint can result in immediate removal with no refund. The myth that they should just go to an RV park ignores pricing, capacity, and discrimination realities. By 2026, RV parks function as gated communities, not safety nets, cutting off the last legal option many families had. Parks have become luxury accommodation for recreational travelers, not refuge for economically displaced families needing stability and affordability most. As housing systems fail, enforcement fills the vacuum. By 2026, police officers, not housing specialists, are deciding who can remain sheltered. These decisions happen curbside at night, often under time pressure and complaint quotas. Officers aren't trained to assess housing needs, family stability, or long-term impact. Their mandate is compliance. When families cannot move immediately, citations are issued. When citations stack, towing follows. Outcomes are predetermined. This shift carries serious consequences. Law enforcement interactions escalate stress, especially for children. Data shows increased police contact raises likelihood of family separation, job loss, and mental health crises. Housing decisions made through enforcement bypass due process. There's no hearing before displacement, no caseworker assigned before shelter loss, and no guarantee of alternative placement. Once enforcement begins, outcomes are rapid and irreversible. Cities defend this approach as public safety, but data shows enforcement doesn't reduce homelessness, it redistributes it. Police time is diverted from crime prevention to managing poverty. When law enforcement becomes the housing authority, systems stop asking who needs help and start asking who must leave. Families caught in this shift are processed, not supported. The statistics are stark. Police departments in enforcement-heavy cities report 30 to 50% of officer hours now dedicated to homeless-related calls. Meanwhile, response times for property crimes and domestic violence increase. One department study showed 85% of RV-related enforcement resulted in displacement without housing placement, proving the approach fails its stated purpose while consuming resources that could address actual public safety concerns. One of the most damaging outcomes of RV criminalization is record creation. Failure to move, pay fines, or appear in court results in misdemeanor charges, bench warrants, or license suspensions. What begins as sleeping in a vehicle escalates into permanent legal consequences. By 2026, even minor citations trigger cascading penalties. Missed court dates, often due to work conflicts or lack of transportation, convert fines into warrants. Warrants lead to arrests or vehicle seizure. Criminal records create long-term barriers. Background checks affect employment, housing applications, insurance rates, and even school enrollment in some districts. Families already struggling lose access to upward mobility permanently. This system punishes survival, not wrongdoing. No harm is required, only non-compliance with rules families cannot realistically meet. Once labeled non-compliant, families are excluded from assistance programs requiring clean records. The irony is devastating. The same system denying affordable housing creates criminal records making future housing impossible. By turning poverty into legal offense, cities lock families into long-term instability with no exit ramp. The scope is expanding rapidly. Court data from 5 major cities shows homeless-related misdemeanors increased 180% between 2022 and 2026. Average time from first citation to bench warrant, 45 days. Once warrants exist, families become afraid to seek help from any government services, driving them further underground. Employment applications requiring background checks become automatic disqualifications, trapping families in poverty while claiming to address it. By 2026, RV families aren't simply displaced, they're forced to hide. Enforcement patterns teach families when and where they can exist without being noticed. Lights off, engines cold, no generators, no visible movement. Families sleep in short shifts, rotate locations nightly, and avoid routine. This constant concealment erodes physical and mental health. Lack of consistent sleep increases workplace accidents, academic failure, and chronic illness risk. Children grow up learning avoidance strategies instead of stability. Parents make decisions based on enforcement maps, not safety. Emergency response becomes harder when families fear calling for help. Living hidden also removes families from visibility-based assistance. Outreach teams can't find them. School liaisons lose contact. Medical follow-ups are missed. Isolation becomes structural. This isn't housing. It's survival under surveillance. Families aren't breaking laws to exploit systems. They're hiding to avoid being erased by them. Criminalization doesn't eliminate homelessness. It forces it underground, where harm multiplies and recovery becomes harder. The health consequences are documented and severe. Sleep studies of displaced families show average sleep duration drops from 7 hours to 3 to 4 hours nightly. Chronic sleep deprivation increases heart disease risk by 45%, diabetes by 30%, and depression by 60%. Children show developmental delays consistent with chronic stress exposure. The system creates health crises. It then punishes families for experiencing completing cycles of harm disguised as law enforcement. By 2026, the pattern is clear. Enforcement targets visibility, not root causes. RVs are removed from tourist corridors, business districts, and residential streets, but housing supply remains unchanged. Affordable housing construction lags far behind demand. Estimates show the United States is short millions of affordable units, yet enforcement budgets continue growing. Cities measure success by reduced complaints, not reduced homelessness. This creates false narratives. Homelessness appears resolved when it's only been displaced. Families pushed to outskirts are no longer counted, studied, or supported. Policy decisions prioritize property values and political optics over human stability. RV bans are faster than zoning reform, cheaper than construction, and quieter than structural change. The result is managed crisis, one designed to be unseen rather than solved. Families are casualties of systems optimized for appearance, not outcomes. The budget priorities tell the complete story. One major city spent $12 million on enforcement-related costs in 2025, citations, towing contracts, court processing, and police overtime, while allocating only $3 million to affordable housing development. That $12 million displaced approximately 2,400 families but created 0 new housing units. Meanwhile, the city's promotional materials claimed significant progress addressing homelessness, citing reduced visible encampments. The gap between spending and outcomes reveals enforcement as performance designed to satisfy constituents demanding action, regardless of whether that action actually helps anyone. The criminalization of RV homelessness isn't isolated policy. It's a test case. If shelter in vehicles can be illegal, future definitions of acceptable housing become narrower. As rents rise again, more Americans will fall outside traditional housing. If RVs are banned today, tomorrow it may be shared housing, converted garages, or multi-generational living. By 2026, this is no longer about RVs. It's about who gets to exist when systems fail. Families are being punished for adapting to economic reality. Once survival becomes illegal, the definition of homelessness shifts from condition to crime. That precedent affects everyone. The trajectory is already visible. Cities are beginning to restrict extended stay motels, limit garage conversions, and enforce occupancy limits, preventing multi-generational households. Each restriction narrows what counts as legitimate shelter, pushing more people into categories subject to enforcement. The underlying question is fundamental. Does society have an obligation to ensure housing exists before criminalizing its absence? Current policy answers no. Enforcement proceeds regardless of shelter availability. treating homelessness as behavioral choice rather than economic circumstance. This framework will expand. Today it's RVs. Tomorrow it's any housing solution arising from necessity rather than market forces. The precedent being set that survival adaptations can be criminalized without providing alternatives represents a fundamental shift in how America treats its most vulnerable populations.
A local nonprofit ramping up its efforts, saying more homeless people are coming to them for help getting off our streets. The group is called Vegas Stronger. They say that it has to do with temperatures.
For the first time in modern history, courts are stepping in to remove people from their RVs, not because of crime, but because they're poor. Thousands are being pushed out of cities with nowhere to go, no services, and no legal parking left. This is bigger than homelessness. It's a new form of displacement. California faces one of America's largest RV homelessness crises, with an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 people living in cars, vans, and RVs statewide. The root cause is simple. Housing costs have become impossible for working people to afford. In major cities, median rent for a one-bedroom apartment often exceeds $2,600 monthly, forcing tens of thousands into vehicle living as their only option. Cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles have responded with aggressive enforcement rather than solutions. San Francisco enforces a 2-hour parking maximum for oversized vehicles on many streets, meaning RV residents must constantly relocate or face tickets ranging from $100 to $200 each. Repeated violations lead to towing, and towing fees in California easily exceed $1,000 once storage and administrative costs pile up. For people already experiencing homelessness, these fees are impossible to pay. Los Angeles conducts regular enforcement sweeps that remove thousands of illegally parked vehicles annually. A single sweep in hotspots like South Downtown can result in 50 to 100 RVs being towed in 1 week. Meanwhile, the city estimates only a few hundred safe parking spaces exist for vehicle dwellers, leaving thousands with no legal place to stay. California's overall homelessness crisis is staggering. On a single night count, over 161,000 people were homeless statewide, with a large proportion unsheltered and many using vehicles as shelter because formal shelters lack capacity. This creates a brutal cycle where enforcement pressure clashes with limited housing resources, leaving RV residents in constant battle to stay mobile, safe, and legal. Oregon's landscape for RV residents changed dramatically after a Supreme Court decision gave cities greater power to ban camping, including sleeping in RVs, even when shelters are full. This legal shift has created a crisis for roughly 16,000 people experiencing homelessness statewide, with a significant share unsheltered or living in vehicles. Cities like Grants Pass and Medford have passed strict ordinances that consider outdoor sleeping, whether in tents, cars, or RVs, a violation of law. People living in RVs on public land can receive fines of $200 to $500 per incident. Repeat violations can lead to arrests or mandates requiring people to leave city limits entirely. Because Oregon's shelter network is severely limited, with many communities having shelter bed capacities dozens short of actual need, enforcing these bans simply pushes people into rural areas without any services. The lack of legal parking options is stark. Safe parking programs in Oregon typically have fewer than 100. Total spaces statewide, meaning the vast majority of RV dwellers have no designated place to stay legally. When enforcement sweeps occur, police or code enforcement officers may impound RVs at costs ranging from $500 to $1,500 or more before owners can recover their vehicles. Combined with high rental costs, particularly in cities like Portland where rents have risen over 30% in the past 5 years, many residents are priced out of housing entirely and have no legal refuge for vehicle living. Oregon's policy shift has effectively turned everyday survival into a criminalized activity for thousands of RV residents who have nowhere else to go. Colorado cities, led by Denver, have pursued large-scale encampment sweeps targeting long-term outdoor living, including RVs parked on public land. Denver has declared homelessness a top priority and authorized frequent sweeps that clear over 100 encampments annually, with some individual sweeps displacing 200 to 300 people at once. Many displaced residents rely on vehicles for survival. Colorado's vehicle-dwelling population has grown alongside broader homeless counts. Statewide, tens of thousands experience homelessness on any given night, with several thousand using vehicles as shelter. Safe parking programs in Colorado remain severely limited. Denver's sanctioned lots hold only a few dozen vehicles at a time, representing a tiny fraction of actual need. Enforcement involves daily relocation orders. Residents might receive a ticket if they don't move every 12 to 24 hours. Tickets in Denver can reach $150 to $300, and filing appeals becomes difficult as many residents lack stable contact addresses. If an RV is towed, retrieval costs often range from $600 to $200 or more, effectively deterring recovery and leaving people without their only home. Colorado's approach combines aggressive push factors through enforcement with extremely limited pull factors through housing placements. Even when shelter beds or rapid rehousing slots are offered, they fall far below actual need, often hundreds short per city. Many shelters don't accommodate pets, partners, or necessary medical equipment, forcing difficult choices. The numbers driving this conflict are stark: skyrocketing rents in Denver and Boulder, vacancy rates below 5%, and thousands of RV residents with few legal choices for where to park without risking fines or displacement. Texas has experienced a sharp rise in homelessness and RV living, driven by rapid population growth and fast climbing rents. In major metros like Austin, Houston, and Dallas, median rents have jumped 30 to 40% in recent years, pricing many residents out of conventional housing. City and county authorities have responded with aggressive enforcement actions against encampments, including sites with RV dwellers. Austin's cleanup operations have removed dozens of homeless camps in single months, and at times 30 to 50 vehicles associated with long-term outdoor living are relocated or cited in a week. These enforcement efforts often give residents only 24 to 48 hours to vacate before fines escalate. Penalties can reach $300 or more per violation, compounding financial losses for people with extremely limited resources. Unlike some West Coast states, Texas hasn't significantly expanded safe parking programs. Most cities have only a handful of designated lots for people living in vehicles, and those lots usually fill quickly. As a result, many residents end up moving repeatedly between counties and towns, tracking enforcement timelines and trying to avoid legal trouble. Texas also differs in its approach to emergency shelter. While some municipalities offer motel voucher programs, these frequently have wait times of weeks due to limited funding and high demand. For working RV residents, staying in a motel can be cost prohibitive at $80 to $120 per night, so many choose to risk fines to remain mobile. The net effect is clear. Texas is experiencing migration of RV dwellers from more expensive states, combined with local enforcement practices that push people out of visible urban spaces without replacement housing, leaving many homeless residents in legal limbo. In Ohio, the push against vehicle dwelling doesn't come from a single statewide law, but from hundreds of local ordinances passed by cities across the state. More than 100 municipalities now ban camping or living in vehicles on public land, meaning RV dwellers parked on city streets or public lots face significant legal risk. In cities like Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo, and Dayton, local codes prohibit storing property or sleeping on public property. Violations are typically civil citations, but repeat offenses can escalate to misdemeanor charges. First-time fines often start around $150 to $300, but repeat violations within a year can total $1,000 or more, plus additional court costs. Many Ohio RV residents live mobile by necessity, maintaining job commitments with no affordable housing alternatives available. Ohio's median rent shows significant increases, over 20% in many urban areas in recent years, making RV living an important survival option for people squeezed by stagnant wages. Yet criminalizing outdoor living pushes many residents into a destructive cycle of fines and mounting legal trouble. Shelter capacity is severely limited, especially for families with pets or medical needs, meaning many people decline placement when offered. Because ordinances vary city by city, someone may be legal in one neighborhood but immediately cited a few blocks away. For RV residents who travel between cities for work, this patchwork creates constant legal jeopardy and uncertainty. With enforcement increasing annually, upticks of 20 to 30% more citations year over year in some cities, Ohio's approach shows how municipal laws, even without statewide prohibitions, are fundamentally reshaping how and where vehicle dwelling can legally occur. Florida is experiencing one of the fastest spikes in RV homelessness in America due to a perfect storm of rising rents, extreme population growth, and climate-driven migration. Over the past 5 years, Florida's homeless population has risen by over 20%, and state estimates suggest 8,000 to 10,000 people may now be living in vehicles, including RVs, vans, and converted buses. Rents have climbed dramatically in Florida's largest metro areas, Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, and Miami, with many zip codes seeing increases of 40 to 60% since the pandemic. In Miami-Dade, average rent hovers above $2,500, forcing working families to seek alternative living situations. RV parks that once cost $500 to $700 monthly now commonly charge $1,200 to $1,800, pricing out many long-term residents and forcing them into parking lots, rest areas, and city streets. Florida cities have responded with strict enforcement ordinances. Many counties ban overnight parking at beaches, parks, and shopping centers. First offense fines range $100 to $250, with repeat violations reaching $500 or more. Towing an occupied RV can exceed $1,000 to $2,000, meaning most impounded rigs are never reclaimed and end up auctioned or crushed. Hurricane season compounds the crisis significantly. During storm alerts, counties clear coastal parking areas and evacuate low-lying zones, affecting thousands living in vehicles who have no backup shelter. Relief shelters often exclude pets or RV units, leaving residents to drive inland, burning fuel many can't afford. Florida shows how enforcement plus geography creates exceptionally risky housing situations for RV dwellers. High rents push people into vehicles, storms push them out of every safe place to park. Georgia has quietly become one of the toughest southeastern states for RV residents because of city-by-city crackdowns and almost non-existent safe parking programs. Homelessness has grown. Sharply, around 12,000 to 15,000 people statewide are unhoused, with roughly 2,000 to 3,000 estimated to be living in vehicles at least part-time. Atlanta leads enforcement pressure. The city expanded anti-camping measures, resulting in hundreds of RVs, vans, and cars being pushed from business corridors and freeway frontage roads. An overnight parking ticket typically costs $100 to $200, escalating to $500 and towing threats on repeat violations. Towing costs often exceed $800 to $1,200, which means losing an RV equals losing a person's only home. Georgia's shelter system is drastically undersized. Atlanta's largest shelters regularly operate at or near 100% capacity, especially in winter months. Many counties, especially suburban and rural areas, have zero shelters at all, leaving people with no legal alternative to vehicle living. That gap forces RV dwellers to relocate constantly, often every few days, to avoid fines or police contact. Housing costs are rising across the state. Atlanta's average rent sits around $1,900 to $2,100, up 30 to 40% in recent years, and even mid-sized cities like Augusta and Savannah report double-digit increases. For blue-collar workers, parking an RV becomes the only financial option until enforcement steps in. The most important takeaway: Georgia is criminalizing vehicle dwelling without offering new housing solutions, leaving RV owners stuck in a destructive cycle of parking bans, constant relocation, and steep penalties that push them deeper into poverty. Washington state has one of the highest percentages of unsheltered homelessness in the country, and vehicles, including RVs, are core to how people survive. Greater Seattle alone reports 3,000 to 4,000 people living in cars or RVs, representing nearly half of its unsheltered population. Statewide, vehicle living is believed to involve over 10,000 residents. Rents in Seattle and Tacoma remain among the highest outside California. A typical one-bedroom now averages $2,000 to $2,300, making even dual-income families vulnerable to displacement. Meanwhile, RV park costs have climbed to $1,000 to $1,600 per month, leading many residents to park in industrial zones or on wide arterial streets. Cities are responding with stepped-up enforcement. Seattle police have cleared dozens of large RV clusters, particularly near stadiums and port districts. When these RV rows are dismantled, 50 to 150 vehicles may be ordered out at once, with extremely limited relocation options. Tickets for extended parking violations often run $200 to $300, and towing bills can exceed $500, one of the highest cost burdens in the nation. Safe parking options remain wildly insufficient. Seattle offers fewer than 300 legal overnight spaces, creating a shortfall of thousands. Shelters often refuse RV residents unless they abandon their belongings, which few will do since those belongings represent everything they own. Washington is a clear example of housing costs and enforcement moving faster than solutions. Vehicle homelessness is rising faster than shelter supply can accommodate, leaving RV dwellers caught between intense legal pressure and economic necessity with nowhere to turn. Arizona has become a magnet for RV living, particularly in Phoenix, Tucson, and rural desert boondocking hubs. The state's homeless population keeps climbing. Over 14,000 are unhoused statewide, with roughly 2,500 to 4,000 believed to be living in vehicles, at least part-time. Phoenix rents now average $1,800 to $2,100, up over 40% in just a few years, dramatically outpacing wage growth for service, trades, and healthcare workers. Meanwhile, RV parks have gone from $400 to $600 monthly to $900 to $1,300 or more, leaving many priced out. When summer temperatures climb past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, living in vehicles becomes not just difficult, but genuinely dangerous. The response has been enforcement without infrastructure. Phoenix conducts routine sweeps of large parking lots and freeway frontage areas, sometimes clearing over 100 RVs and cars in a month. Many cities ban overnight parking without exception, issuing tickets $150 to $350 per incident. Towing in Arizona may cost $800 to $1,100, plus daily storage fees. In rural counties, residents often park on public desert land, but officials are increasingly enforcing 15-day stay limits, meaning people must constantly relocate dozens of miles. Fuel costs, ongoing repairs, and heat stress drain already thin budgets quickly. Arizona underscores a brutal reality. A growing number of people need RV living to survive, but the systems they depend on, parking access, utilities, shelter, were never designed for them. The result is a population constantly chased by the law and the weather, with no safe place to land. Nevada, especially Las Vegas and Reno, is seeing one of the fastest transitions from traditional housing to vehicle shelter in America. Statewide homelessness has risen to over 15,000 people, and 2,000 to 3,500 are believed to be living in RVs, vans, and cars. Las Vegas rent inflation has been extreme. Average monthly rent leaped from around $1,000 in the mid-2010s to $1,600 to $1,900 today, with many neighborhoods topping $2,000. Pair that with stagnant wages and soaring move-in deposits, and thousands simply can't stay housed. Cities have aggressively enforced parking restrictions. Las Vegas prohibits sleeping in vehicles in many zones from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., making compliance nearly impossible for people who need to sleep. Parking fines commonly start at $200, and towing an RV can total $700 to $1,200, depending on size and storage duration. With limited urban parking options, many residents retreat to desert perimeters, industrial outskirts, casino overflow lots, or BLM land. But even desert areas now face enforcement. Some counties demand monthly relocation, and summer heat, often 110 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, poses deadly risks when generators break or fuel runs out. Nevada shelters remain insufficient. Clark County beds regularly run 80 to 100% full, and most don't accept animals, possessions, or couples, forcing vehicle residents to choose between losing their home or remaining outside illegally. Nevada shows how quickly a state can become dependent on RV shelter as a housing safety net, and how fast enforcement can erase that lifeline, forcing people into the margins at the hottest edge of the country. Michigan's homeless population has climbed steadily, with statewide counts showing over 14,000 people experiencing homelessness on any given night. A growing portion, 1,500 to 2,500 people, live in vehicles including RVs, especially in cold urban centers like Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Flint. Rent increases outpaced wage growth sharply. In Detroit, rents have gone from roughly $900 per month to over $1,600 per month in many neighborhoods, and security deposits often require first, last, and a deposit totaling $3,000 to $4,000, completely out of reach for low-income residents. RV parks once charging $300 to $600 monthly now ask $700 to $1,100, reducing legal options for long-term parking. Michigan cities generally lack large, safe parking networks. Detroit's only sanctioned sites house fewer than 100 vehicles, a tiny fraction of actual need. Enforcement focuses on anti-camping laws applied broadly. For instance, Detroit and Grand Rapids issue fines for sleeping in vehicles on posted streets. Fines typically range $150 to $300 per violation. If an RV is towed, retrieval fees, including administrative costs, often exceed $900 to $1,500. Winter compounds risks significantly. Michigan's frigid temperatures regularly dip below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and shelters fill quickly. Yet shelters often do not accept RV residents with pets or extensive belongings. As a result, many RV residents choose to stay mobile rather than lose their camp. Local jurisdictions justify enforcement by citing public safety and sanitation concerns, but critics argue the disconnect between law enforcement and housing capacity creates a destructive cycle. People are ticketed into debt, lose vehicles they can't afford back, and end up more deeply homeless than before. Pennsylvania's homeless population, estimated at nearly 18,000 people, has a notable segment, 2,000 to 4,000 people, living in vehicles like RVs due to high rents, slow housing development, and labor market shifts. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are the pressure centers, with rents rising more than 30% in recent years and vacancy rates under 5%. Local ordinances vary widely across the state. Philadelphia's code bans sleeping in vehicles on public streets, issuing tickets of $150 to $300 for violations. Repeat citations can escalate into misdemeanor charges. Towing fees are steep, often $1,000 or more once storage and admin costs are included. Many residents simply abandon their rigs rather than pay these impossible fees. Some Western Pennsylvania cities like Erie and Allentown have enacted similar anti-camping and vehicle dwelling restrictions, with fines up to $500 on repeat offenses. These ordinances apply to cars and RVs alike. In many cases, signs prohibiting camping cover broad swaths of land near rails, waterways, and industrial corridors, leaving few legal options for parking. Pennsylvania's shelter system has severely limited capacity. In Philadelphia, winter shelter programs fill to 100% nightly, and many do not accept pets. RV residents who bring animals often choose to remain in vehicles rather than enter shelter systems that reject them. The rise of RV camps, clusters of vehicles near highways and service areas, has pressured local officials to act. However, moments after sweeps, new camps often sprout, illustrating a revolving door pattern. Enforcement without net increases in housing simply moves the problem around. Pennsylvania's central challenge is a patchwork of laws where someone may be legal in one township but criminalized in the next. Tennessee's homeless population has grown sharply, and vehicle dwelling is one of the fastest-growing segments. Current estimates put statewide homelessness at 12,000 to 15,000, with 1,500 to 3,000 people living in RVs, vans, or cars. Nashville, Memphis, and Knoxville are the hotspots where RV camps are most visible. Rents have jumped 25 to 40% in many Tennessee cities, and wages haven't kept pace at all. A typical RV lot, once costing $300 to $500 monthly, now commonly charges $800 to $1,200. So many residents seek cheaper but illegal parking on city and county streets. Local governments have responded with strict enforcement ordinances. In Nashville, for example, RV dwelling on public streets is banned completely. Violators can be fined $200 to $300 per incident. Towing fees often hit $700 to $1,000. And without alternative legal parking, residents must constantly relocate to avoid escalating fines. Shelter capacity is extremely low. Nashville's largest shelters frequently operate at 90 to 100% capacity, especially in winter months. Programs that exist for vehicle dwellers are limited, often less than 50 spaces statewide, and are typically first come, first served. Tennessee's legal patchwork complicates mobility significantly. One county may allow daytime parking but ban overnight stays. Another may enforce a 24-hour roll-on rule. For someone working multiple jobs, this means calculating hours, distances, and fine risks every single day, effectively penalizing employment. The real cost burden becomes clear when you add it up. A ticket here, a tow there, lost work hours to relocate, and preventive moves burn both fuel and hope, trapping Tennessee's RV population between survival and citation. North Carolina's homelessness has climbed steadily, and vehicle dwelling is growing as rents balloon beyond local median incomes. Statewide, roughly 12,000 to 14,000 people experience homelessness nightly, with 2,000 to 3,500 living in vehicles. Charlotte, Raleigh, and Asheville are central hubs for this crisis. Charlotte's average one-bedroom rent now sits above $1,600, up over 30% in the last few years, while wages remain stagnant, leaving many working families in precarious positions. RV costs have jumped too. Small parks that used to go for $350 to $600 per month now list at $900 to $1,300. North Carolina cities respond with anti-camping ordinances that sweep public spaces and streets regularly. Charlotte, for instance, prohibits overnight camping, including in vehicles, on city property. Fines are $160 to $300 and increase on repeat offenses. Many jurisdictions allow towing after 24 hours, with costs often $800 to $1,200. Safe parking programs are scarce across the state. Charlotte's sanctioned lots hold fewer than 100 vehicles, and demand consistently outstrips supply. Shelters operate near maximum capacity. Winter seasons see 90 to 100% occupancy most. Nights. North Carolina's rural counties often have little to no shelter infrastructure, meaning RV residents may travel long distances to find services, driving up fuel costs and risk of fines in unfamiliar enforcement zones. Because parking laws vary by municipality, RV residents may face tickets one block over from where they were legally parked. The combination of rising housing costs, sparse legal parking, and rising fines, plus towing bills that often surpass $1,000, creates a cost spiral that pushes people deeper into instability, even as they try to escape the housing crisis. Wisconsin's cold climate and limited shelter capacity make RV living both an option and a serious risk. Winter temperatures regularly drop below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and statewide homelessness numbers, 10,000 to 12,000 people, include a significant contingent living in vehicles when shelters are full. Estimates suggest 1,000 to 2,000 RV dwellers across cities like Milwaukee, Madison, and Green Bay. Milwaukee, facing rising housing costs and limited affordable units, reports average rents now $300 to $1,700 for basic apartments, pricing out many low-wage workers. RV parks that once charged $400 to $700 monthly now routinely exceed $800 to $1,000, narrowing legal parking options dramatically. Cities enforce stringent anti-camping and vehicle dwelling laws. Milwaukee prohibits overnight sleeping in vehicles parked on public streets. Tickets are typically $150 to $300, with repeat offenders facing escalating fines and possible misdemeanor charges. If a vehicle is towed, fees, including storage, often reach $900 to $400. In winter months, enforcement becomes more frequent under concerns about public safety and freezing conditions. Shelters fill quickly during winter, running as high as 95 to 100% capacity most nights. Many shelters have rules excluding large pets or personal belongings, pushing RV residents to stay outside even in dangerous conditions. A significant problem in Wisconsin is the mismatch between enforcement and services. Cities frequently issue relocation orders requiring people to move within 12 to 24 hours. Tickets accumulate quickly for people simply trying to survive. With only a handful of sanctioned parking spaces statewide and many shelters lacking capacity for complex needs, RV residents are left balancing extreme weather, legal pressure, and basic survival. What's happening right now isn't a crisis. It's a warning shot for every American living on the edge. Should states support RV residents or push them out? Drop your comment below. I read everyone. And before you go, hit subscribe and don't miss our next video. Things are only getting more intense from here.